All right, YouTube, there's big news for Donald Trump, but analyzing this, it doesn't matter for the reasons that many people are saying that it matters. That is, the endorsement, of course, of Donald Trump by Sarah Palin. Why wouldn't it matter? Why wouldn't we care specifically who Sarah Palin endorses? She's generally disliked by centrists. She's generally disliked by independents. She's considered a little bit of an attention whore, sort of lunatic fringe. Her views on certain issues are actually centrist, but she is an evangelical. She's religious, rural Republican. Why would her endorsement not matter then? It's because, quite clearly, a lot of the people who are supporting Trump, they don't really care what Palin has to say. Why does it matter? Here's why it matters. It has nothing to do with the fact that she endorsed Trump. It had to do with the conspicuous absence of an endorsement of Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz right now, he's still running in second nationwide. He's still running second in Iowa. I think he's fourth in New Hampshire and like third-ish in South Carolina. So, he's not a terribly weak candidate at this point. I've already predicted he's painted himself into a Santorum 2.0 corner. He's not going to be the nominee. But he'll perform well enough to get second or third in some of these states. He'll have some delegates. He's well received by certain elements within the Republican Party, just not the mainstream. Why would she not endorse him? Quite clearly, she doesn't believe that Ted Cruz is going to be the nominee. She's coming out, she's hedging her bet, and she's saying, well, we can read into this one of two things. Either she thinks Trump is inevitable. She may or may not even like the dude, but she thinks, well, he's going to be the nominee, so I'm not going to go off and endorse somebody totally different because I don't want to look like a cunt when it comes around and the Republican nominee is somebody that I actively campaigned against. She doesn't want that to happen because she's in it for the money. Let's face it. Or it is also evidence, perhaps, that certain segments of the evangelical light within the establishment are warming up to Trump. Now, this would be the worst possible news for Ted Cruz. Going into Iowa, what just happened to Ted Cruz? Sarah Palin, one of Ted Cruz's formerly greatest allies, she's campaigned for him, she's paid lip service to him, she's fawned over Ted Cruz, she has abandoned him. She switched to the Trump camp. That's strike number one. Strike number two, of course, was the New York values thing. Cruz did not get the upper hand. His shills, his paid staffers online claim that he did. The polls clearly show, nope, sorry, it was Trump that got the upper hand. He's just bumped up a couple points nationwide. I'm talking about the aggregate. Don't look at this Monmouth poll that people are saying, oh, well, Trump, just jumped up 3 or 4 points. Don't bother with it. Wait until RCP fully updates and it's included there in an aggregate. Do not look at individual polls until like 1 or 2 days before Iowa. Until then, they're fucking completely useless. I do happen to agree, though. Cruz has dropped to around 16, 17%. Exactly as I fucking predicted. Many people said, oh, no, I think that Cruz will still get it. There are still people who are saying Jeb Bush will be the nominee. Jeb Bush is not going to be nominated by the Republican Party. Sorry, folks, the people pumping money into it know that he's not going to win. He would not win a general election, regardless of how weak his opponent is. Jeb Bush is completely done. When he places third at best in the first 3 states, he will drop out. He's not even going to make it till the end of Super Tuesday. That's my prediction. Or if he does hold on, he'll come in 4th or 5th. Kasich is going to do better than Jeb Bush in New Hampshire. You think that Jeb Bush wants to sit there and just get pounded over and over and just stay in the race stubbornly for no reason? He's not looking, unlike Carson or Fiorina or Huckabee or some of these other fringe candidates. They're in there either to parrot one issue over and over and get a slot on TV or with a lobby or something, or they're in there to ingratiate themselves to the nominee who will be Trump in order to get like a cabinet position or a position within Congress. That doesn't apply to Jeb. Jeb is this state-level governor figure. He just wants to go back to being governor of his state, probably, when he loses. He's not going to stick it in for the long term. Kasich might. Kasich now is arguably the strongest establishment Republican, believe it or not. Nobody took him seriously before. He may end up taking up the banner that Marco Rubio dropped, especially on the power of his run in New Hampshire. If he comes in second in New Hampshire, he probably will stay in. He's going to underperform everywhere else other than maybe Nevada, but he'll stick it in. The third strike for Cruz, of course, the governor of Iowa coming out and saying bad things about Ted Cruz. It has been the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day for Ted Cruz. Clear people don't like Ted Cruz. They understand his views are not as far right as he presents. He's a fucking weasel. He's moved to the right in typical GOP front runner or near front runner stratagem. It doesn't work. It fucked up the election the last time around when you had a weak incumbent who any skilled debater who was willing to stay in the center would have defeated Obama. They look back, they see Romney tried to move to the right and ended up screwing himself because he was not well-spoken enough. So Trump has abandoned this attempt. Trump now is the anti-Nixon. That is, he's doing the exact opposite of the sort of cobble together this group and that group that Nixon did with his Southern strategy. The post-Nixonian electoral map that we have seen has remained somewhat stable since that period of time. Nixon leaves, Ford gets in. Then things go to shit in this country largely after that era. There was still some hope for the United States before then. Trump has abandoned the modern ethos of the Republican Party. Now, the Democrats are still making the same mistake. The problem is, as I said in my previous video, Trump was for gay marriage in the 90s. Trump does not care if you get an abortion. Trump largely doesn't care about legal immigrants. Yeah, he wants a border wall. Yeah, he wants to deport illegals. On legal immigration, he's a centrist. He's a Reaganite. He's more of a fiscal conservative. He's not even pro-war. He's made it very clear he was against Iraq. Hillary voted for it. That's how he's going to win the general election. He's not doing the typical game that the two parties have done so often, which is, I want to win most of the swing states in a contested election. I just care if I get elected, but I don't really care what margin I get elected by. He is going to force Hillary Clinton, who will probably be the Democratic nominee, to compete for portions of the country that the Democratic Party has taken for granted now for a generation. And it's going to crush the Democratic Party in the general election if he is the nominee. People like Palin probably understand this. I'm sure he's held meetings with some of these individuals. He's explained exactly what he's doing. They're well aware of his strategy. Ultimately, though, it's odd. I don't think the Democrats have quite understood where he's coming from. If they're hoping to paint Donald Trump with the far right hates gays, hates women stuff, it's not going to work because he'll come out and release clips of himself from 20, 30 years ago proving them wrong. And then he'll say, well, what are these fucking Democrats going to run on now? The fact that some Democrats owe him a great deal of money probably is not going to help their cause either. Ted Cruz is fucked. Ted Cruz has already peaked. He's just declined. He's declining in Iowa. He declined in South Carolina. He was edging up there. Now he's down again. He's peaked. He's going to be the next Fiorina or Carson. People came to me and said, oh, Ted Cruz now is going to be the establishment boy. It's certain this time. You should have learned from the last few candidates they tried this with. Jeb Bush was the front runner until Donald Trump got in the race and swiftly absorbed all of his support. Now Jeb is down around 5th or 6th place. He's not going to be in the running after Super Tuesday, certainly. Kasich and maybe Christie and Rubio will be the insiders, but they'll still be splitting the insider vote in a lot of these states. How the hell are they supposed to beat Trump? And after Super Tuesday, when it becomes clear that Trump has won all the states or most of the states and he's gotten a 10-point nationwide bump, most of the rest of the races are winner take all. All he's got to do is get about 34% of the vote in any of these states because there are going to be at least 2 or 3 viable candidates left that will be splitting the insider vote, which will turn into essentially anyone but Trump vote. But there are going to be too many people and they'll all be debating which candidate is strongest against Trump. I would like to point this out. There are different kinds of elections in this country. When things are going really, really well, you end up with people like Silent Cal, Calvin Coolidge, who is from my state. You get an election in which people have elected somebody to keep the status quo going. This is where Clinton is aiming to go, by the way. Clinton is under the delusion that things right now are so hunky-dory and happy in this country that she should run on a platform of I'm the next Obama. That's another reason she doesn't have a clue what's going on at this point. I don't know, that stroke must have affected her judgment, and she's just not listening to her advisors. Then there are unifying elections. In a unifying election, you can arrange elections into 4 basic groups. Unifying election, things may be troubled, but people generally agree on what's wrong. They simply disagree on how to fix it. You get these a lot. You got this in under, Obama versus McCain. Everyone knew that there were problems with foreign policy. They simply disagreed on how to handle it. McCain doubled down, said, well, we just need to bomb them more. Obama said, no, we need to get out of the war. Now, ultimately, they agreed largely that we need to bomb them more. Obama's not an anti-war candidate, but that's what he pretended to be. Then you have a disunifying election in which the central problem, is disagreed upon. It's not like a unifying election. In a unifying election, the problem is clearly delineated. Everybody knows what the problem is. It's fucking obvious. The partisanship comes in disagreeing on how to handle the problem. How to handle. Do we stimulate the economy or not? Do we let it fail or do we bail them out? That sort of thing. Disunifying election, the actual problems are disagreed upon. That is, the partisan camp has split further, to the point where, specifically in a dichotomy like ours, which it's really a one-party system masquerading as a two-party system, let's just say the Democrats and the Republicans, they fixate on different issues. Right now, we're kind of in this kind of election on its surface. The Republicans are talking about we need the wall, we need foreign policy, this, that, and the other thing. The Democrats are still talking about the economy, specifically social inequality, fiscal inequality, healthcare is what Bernie Sanders talks about. Then you have a revolutionary election. In a revolutionary election, things have gone to shit to such a point where if you don't get a deep-seated reformer leading at least one of the parties, that party can undergo a schism. This is how the Republican Party was born over the slavery debate in the 1800s. We are now getting to the point where if in this election cycle, we don't end up with a president like Sanders or Trump or Rand Paul, somebody who has what would formerly have been considered a fringe ideology. That's how you tell that it's disunifying. Fringe ideologies not formerly taken seriously or which didn't exist suddenly enter the national debate and find popularity. This happened in Germany, by the way, in Weimar, Germany. Communism rose. Communism was the most voted for party for a couple of elections there. The Nazis rose up. The centrist parties got soundly defeated over and over again. Only the fact that nobody got an absolute majority kept them in power for a few extra elections. That's why the Nazis didn't take control earlier, or the communists or something. You would have had a communist Germany. It would have been very funny to see how chaotic it would have been. Arguably, it would have been worse than the Nazis just seizing power under the auspices of, say, oh, well, Hitler will be chancellor. Probably more lives would have been killed. Would have been even more bloody, because then Germany would have ripped itself apart before there was even a fucking war. A revolutionary election is what we're headed towards. If the Democrats choose Hillary, who just wants to be Obama 2.0, they're going to have a fucking problem, because the next time around, the progressives will nominate somebody like Warren, and they will ignore the establishment. They'll do what Trump's doing now. On the other side, attempt at reforming the GOP was already made last time around with Ron Paul. The establishment did everything in their power to dumb him down. They did so successfully. What happened? They lost the election. A lot of Republicans are very bitter over this fact, specifically those that leaned libertarian. You've got the rise of third parties right now. More and more Americans are joining the LP, the Libertarian Party. Its vote share has never been this high. It's in former elections, it barely cracked 1%. Now it's 3 or 4% in some of these states. That's quite a large total, by the way, historically speaking, for a third party. You got to go back to the Whig era to find something comparable to this. This is essentially what this election now looks like. We're in a disunifying election headed towards a revolutionary stage. And the only stage after that is a devolution into a literal revolution or civil war if you still don't have reform. If Washington continues in its gridlock, its useless partisanship, which, I mean, it exploits partisan issues without actually offering partisan reform. Even partisan reform is impossible today in the modern GOP, the modern Democratic Party. Trump represents a new wave of Republicans. Trump does not care if you're gay. Trump does not care if you have an abortion. Trump does not care if you're from an immigrant family if you came here legally. I can assure you of this. He does not fucking care. He represents under 30 Republicans, fiscal conservatives tired of gridlock in D.C., who really, they're so past the fucking wedge issues that are thrown at them by the Democrats, that are used by evangelicals within the Republican Party. And I will tell you this, Nixonian thought evolved directly out of Goldwater's Southern stratagem. Before this, you had warnings within the Ike-era GOP. If these evangelicals manage to take over the party, fuck it. We're done for, because they're not willing to compromise. They're just so moralistic. They don't even care about fiscal issues. Or if they do, they're secondary to a bunch of moral ramblings nobody gives a fuck about. They warned at the time that this would happen. And the Southern strategy went forward. Nixon won re-election in a landslide. He won every state except for Massachusetts and D.C. Biggest electoral landslide in American history. But it has crippled the modern Republican Party. If the Republican Party were to renunciate the evangelicals, tell them to fuck off, tell them we're done with these wedge issues. All we want is a smaller government. We want lower taxes. We're tired of government abuse. We're tired of government excess. Here's our plan. And that plan was any good at all. They would win every fucking election in every single state, because what wedge issues would be left for the Democrats to exploit? Trump realizes this. He wants to go into an election in which he's trying to win every state. He's going to compete for New York and Michigan and California, states that haven't been red in a long time, because he is old enough to remember Reagan. And Reagan did win California, didn't he? A lot of this, even Vermont, a lot of the states that are heavily blue now are still in play. To him, they're swing states. The Democrats don't realize this. The only other person in the race who could potentially do this is Sanders. But Sanders is getting shafted on the other side. His support has not risen up to the heights that Trump's has. It will be the GOP that bears the standard of attempting reform before we enter an even more fringe election 4 years from now that will make this one look very civil. And that's a warning also to the Democrats. You're worried about gay rights and women's rights and so forth. You should be voting for Trump then. You should defect to the Republican Party. Look back at what he said in the 1990s. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care. He's not a pro-war candidate. You can look at his record of what he's consistently said since the 1970s, 1980s. He's not pro-war. He probably supported gay marriage, said, oh, it's a way to make money. Well, that's what Trump's into. He cares about money. He doesn't care if you're gay. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, was against gay marriage as a senator in the mid-2000s. How strange is that? That's why I believe he'll win the general election. But Cruz had a terrible day. Governor of Iowa, the fallout from his attempt to attack Trump completely and utterly failing. Trump just bashed him over the head and walked off. Palin now conspicuously has abandoned Ted Cruz. This was his most high-profile ally within the U.S. government. Anywhere, state level, national level, highest profile ally. She said, fuck Ted Cruz, I'm going with Donald Trump. Doesn't even matter from the perspective of, oh, these people with chops and popularity, they backed Trump. Nobody cares. I don't care what Sarah Palin thinks either. I think she's a fucking lunatic. But I didn't expect her to back him. And now it's put him, again, back in the news. He's back on the front page alongside Palin, grinning and doing her mama bear stuff. This will not ingratiate him to some of the centrists, but the thing is, a lot of them, they've already pledged their support. That's hardened support. They're not going to abandon him. But then, the evangelicals and the Tea Partiers who have been resisting Trump quite heavily, they might have second thoughts. That would really screw Ted Cruz. Who, by the way, he's not even eligible to be our president. No, he's not a natural-born citizen. He was not born in this country. He held dual citizenship until 15 months ago. No, he's not a natural-born citizen of the United States. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if he had immediately had his Canadian citizenship renounced. If he had been solely a U.S. citizen, nobody would even give a fuck. Also, he appears to have more loyalty to Israel than to the United States. He's a cuck-servative, as some people put it. No, that doesn't make you a Nazi, by the way, for saying it. Yeah, that's what a cuckold is. He has more loyalty to some foreign country than he does his own. I don't give a fuck about Ted Cruz. He's not going to be the nominee. That's about all. Peace out.